Hey, thanks a lot. We're glad you're here. So we're gonna. Guess I'm changing the slides here. That'll slow me down a little bit.
Would you like one of us?
Do you have a? No, that'd be worse. Thank you though for that invite. So we're going to talk about high soybean yield, and you know the whole deal. This is part of our heroic quest to save the world with soybean, and the problem is procreation. Too many people. I know you've heard this a million times. There's going to be 9 billion people in the next 40 years, and the good news is most of them won't be here. It'll just seem like that. They'll mostly be in developing countries, and then we need to double crop production to feed those people. By the way, that's all crops, not just corn, but also soybean. So I did the math here. I tried to figure out what the average yield in the U.S. was in a normal year, and it's about 42 bushels per acre. And so I did the math and added a little fudge factor, so that means the holy grail of soybean production is 85 bushels. I know 100 sounds better, but it's a lot harder to get than 85, and 85 would be double, so that's our goal. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a real challenge to get 85 bushel soybean, because if you look at how corn and soybean yields have changed in the U.S., over the last 40 to 100 years. So there's year, here's yield, there's corn. In orange, it's a Illini orange, by the way, and here's the advent of hybrids and fertilizer, and corn yield has gone straight up. Now we got biotechnology in there. Corn yield's gone up about 2 bushels per acre per year. A lot of people think that soybean yields have stagnated. They haven't. They've actually gone up. So if you look over the last 80 years, soybean yields have gone up almost 0.4 bushels per acre per year. And by the way, if we stay at that rate, then it's going to take 100 years to get to the holy grail of 85. So we need to increase the rate of soybean yield by 2.5 times that, and that's going to be a real challenge. But I'll tell you, 85 bushels can be done. Each year in state soybean contests, somebody does grow 85 bushels. Apparently there's not a national soybean grower yield contest like there is corn, but there's state contests. And each year somebody grows 85 bushels in the state soybean contests. I think we'll probably hear about that at lunchtime. And this guy, the world record of soybean is 161 bushels. And guess what? I know this guy's name, the guy that did it. And if you could, if you're this guy, you're a celebrity. So I know they swear they make money doing this, and I think it's largely on the endorsements. If you could win the state contest or grow the record yield, you're a celebrity. And so you know the tactic behind winning one of these contests. You find the sweet spot on the yield monitor and you throw everything at it. Apparently you have to throw a little ground up kitchen sink at it too, I'm told. And I know they swear they make money, but I know it does show the biological potential. But I think to grow the 85 bushel soybean yield, you're going to have to do what I call intelligent intensification. And the intelligence is allegedly what you're getting here. And then the intensification, is all those fine management and input factors that affect soybean yield. And the idea is I'm going to put them all in the same place at the same time with some sort of grand finale in yield. And I'm going to use the 6 secrets of soybean success as my guide. Okay, this is the flip side to the corn wonders, the 7 wonders of the corn yield world. The other side of the record. So the Illinois Soybean Association came to me and they said, boy, we want to make, we want farmers to pay more attention to soybean management. And we want to make soybean yield sexy, like the 7 wonders. And I said, well, if you want to make it sexy, make it secret. And, hence the 6 secrets of soybean success. And it's a little bit of a misnomer because I'm going to tell you what they are. And I obviously can't keep a secret, so keep that in mind. And these are, if I want high soybean yield, I want to know those factors that have the biggest impact on soybean yield, and I want to get them right. Hence the 6 secrets. So here's the sad fact of life. It's what I call prerequisites. And a prerequisite is what you have to have or do before you can have or do what you want to do. Okay, the lending industry uses prerequisites all the time. You need to pay back that first loan to get the second one, apparently. That's a prerequisite. if you want to send your son or daughter to a fantastic school like the University of Illinois, they need certain prerequisites. You know, high school degree, pretty good one, good test scores, a lot of money. I mean, those are the prerequisites. So there's some prerequisites to the 6 secrets, and I didn't mean they're not important. They're actually crucial. But either they don't add yield or they don't need to be done every year. You know, you know, tile guy says to me, I need a new tile between all my other tiles. Pretty sure he's right. Man, is that expensive. But oh, am I happy when it's done. I mean, so drainage is key. You know, weeds don't add yield. You know, as satisfying as it is to wait till the weeds get up and hit them with glyphosate and have a clean field at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure some damage has already been done. And then I'm going to talk about I'll talk about soil fertility, but I'll tell you from your soil test on soybean, the pH is really important. One of the reasons you're liming your soils, not for corn, it's for the soybean. So these are the key prerequisites. Now there's a few key things about there's some nice things about soybean. That are not one of the 6 secrets, but they're good. And one of the big ones is that if soybean was my previous crop, my corn crop's better. So growing soybean as your previous crop really helps your corn. You know, I'll tell you, if soybean was your previous crop, your next year corn's going to be 25 bushels better on average. And by the way, if corn was your previous crop, it's the other way around. It's a 25 bushel yield penalty. So if you like corn, it's good to have soybean the year before. And I want you to think about soybean and corn. Soybean's a taproot crop. So that taproot, you know, kind of fractures the soil, gets down there deep. And so soybean, as opposed to corn, improves the tilth of the soil. Anybody who's ever chisel plowed a corn or a soybean field, man, you know those crops work up differently. And I'm going to show you, I'll show you an example of this. This is one day after a fall chisel plow on my previous crop nursery. So I call all my research fields nurseries. I discovered you can charge the seed company more money to do research there if you call it a nursery than just a field, because they have this romantic connotation to their seed nursery. So here's my previous crop nursery. And this is one day after a fall chisel plow. Here's where soybean was the previous crop. This is 3rd-year corn residue. You know, talk about a difference in soil tilth. I mean, on this side, on the soybean side, I could skip across here in my bare feet. But when I came over here, I might sprain my ankle, fall down, and gouge my eye out on a piece of stalk residue. Of course, the problem is root balls. You know, corn plants glue soil particles to their roots. That's called the rhizosheath. That's a good thing during the season. It's not as good later when I chisel plow it up. Soybean doesn't do that. Soybean has that taproot that goes deeper and fractures that soil. And so, you know, I mean, you know, if you're planting your corn crop on this side, guess what? You need 10% more seed than if you're planting it on this side. So soybean, that's another benefit of soybean. Not one of the secrets, but it really helps your previous crop. It improves your soil tilth. And then I'll go into the 6 secrets. And I don't know these as well as corn yet. If it was corn, I could tell you what each secret is worth. I can't quite do that with soybean yet. But I'm going to go through all the secrets, and I'll justify some of them. And then my colleague will show you how we've used this information to develop a high yield package. So I'll go through each of these. And I base these secrets on my understanding of soybean biology and reading the scientific literature, which basically means I made them up. But now normally if I had one of these deals, I'd have 4 more, and I go to the top in some sort of dramatic fashion. I'm not sure where I got that from, but I'm gonna go top down instead. And you already know the factor that has the biggest impact on your soybean productivity, the one you have the least control over, the weather. So I like to make a smug recommendation for soybean yield. It goes like this: plant early. Okay, well, good luck with that if the weather's not in the mood. It's the weather that dictates when you can plant, and it's the weather after your planting date that dictates the success of your planting date. And as much as I want to plant early and be done with it, early planting date is not one of my 6 secrets, because it's completely controlled by the weather. You know, if I have my wish for soybean weather, you know, I want to have a warm, moist spring. I don't want to have too much rain in June and July. I want some, but not too much. And then come August, I want it to rain all the time and have high nighttime temperatures. And I rarely get my weather wish, I'll tell you. Most of the best weather is north, south, east, or west of where my research is. And you're burdened by the fact that I do research in this state. And the good news is, when any of my grand agronomic schemes don't work, which, sadly is fairly often, I just blame the weather. And it's often true. And you know what you do if the weather's not working for you? So if the weather's not working for you, you refer to the weather using that pregnant dog term. You say, oh man, this weather's a real pregnant dog. And I'm going to tell you, 2012's weather was a real pregnant dog over a lot of the corn and soybean state. Harken back to the end of July, U.S. Corn Monitor, end of July, there's our fair state right here. And the whole darn state was mirrored in some kind of drought. I mean, we had severe drought, we had exceptional drought, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as exceptional drought. Usually when I use the word exceptional, it's good, it means something good, but not when it comes to drought. So a lot of the Corn Belt was mirrored in drought in 2012, and in fact the drought was so bad in 2012 it made it all the way over here to Hawaii. I mean, talk about a pregnant dog weather year. Am I glad that one's done. Hope we don't see that again. Weather rules. What's number 2? Again, this is allegedly the factor under your control that has the biggest impact on soybean productivity. And I think you're going to be a little surprised by this one because it is fertility. Fertility. Widely overlooked, and for a couple of reasons. And the main reason is that a lot of you, I'm sure, are allegedly putting 2 years of fertility on the corn ahead of the soybean, and hoping the soybean has enough that's left. I'll show you the corn's using a lot more of it than you realize. Okay, the second reason that fertility is widely overlooked is that a lot of people think that the main nutrient that soybean needs is potassium. And so I'll show you that's wrong. And then the third reason of that fertility is the factor that's limited is that soybean gets some of its nitrogen from the atmosphere, via nodules. So you know how the story goes. Here's the nodules, and that's a symbiotic association with soil bacteria, Bradyrhizobium, and then the soybean plant gives the nodules the sugars, and in return the nodules get some of their nitrogen from the atmosphere. That's called fixation. And the key thing is some, not all of it. Soybean gets about half of its nitrogen from the nodules. So I had a bright idea. I said, well, I'll just put a bunch of fertilizer on the soybean plant. And of course, you know what happens then. It's one of those can't have your cake and eat it too deals. Put a lot of fertilizer in the soybean, of course, you'll shut these nodules right down. So some, not all. It's about half. And soybean is a big nitrogen user. I'll show you what some of the macronutrient use for 62 bushel soybean requires is. And so 62 bushel soybean. This was actually done last year at Northern Illinois, 2 sites. I had a grad student do this. You can squeeze a lot of juice out of a grad student as part of their indentured servitude. And so what I looked at here is some of the key macronutrients, how much is required to produce. So that's the amount of those nutrients the crop has to either suck up from the soil, or at least the nitrogen, it gets some of it from the nodules. And then over here I showed you how much of these nutrients are removed with the grain. For phosphorus and potassium, that's maintenance. And then I have the value here I call the harvest index. And the harvest index is of the amount that it sucks up or fixes, how much of it is removed with the grain. So a 62 bushel soybean crop has to accumulate 171 pounds of nitrogen, and it removes almost 200. Now I said about half of that comes from the atmosphere, half. So 135 from the atmosphere, 135 from the soil. But guess what? I took off 194. So this means the 62 bushel soybean crop actually removes 65 pounds of N. Right, this is a urban legend. Soybean adds N to the soil. Not true. It's the other way around. Soybean removes nitrogen from the soil. And roughly, as a rough rule, for every bushel of soybean you produce, you remove a pound of N from the soil. Okay, but guess what? As you raise the yield level, it gets even worse. So I'll show you here. This is a study out of the scientific literature, and I actually had to read this study, or I had my associate do it. And so this is analysis. These guys put together a bunch of soybean research, and they're looking at different yield levels here and how much nitrogen that the plant has to accumulate, either from the atmosphere or from the atmosphere and the soil. And so that orange line is how much the nitrogen the different yield levels have to have, and the blue line is how much it gets from the nodules. And guess what? The higher the yield, the lazier the nodules get, I guess, or the less they can keep up. Higher the yield, the more N you got to take up out of the soil. When we get to the holy grail of soybean production, 85 bushels, we're going to take 100 pounds of N out of the soil. So soybean does not add N to the soil, it actually removes it. And the higher the yield level, the more N you're going to remove. So big N user. Now the other factor is that a lot of people think that the potassium is the biggest nutrient that soybean needs. And it is true that soybean needs a lot of potassium. And what I've done here, I notice there's a lot of information. I compared 62 bushel soybean to 230 bushel corn. So again, this is how much it has to take up. This is how much is removed with the grain. And if you look at, 62 bushel soybean, actually has more N in it than does 230 bushel corn, and you remove more. That's because the seed are high in N. If you look at potassium, notice that those crops need the same amount of potassium. And it is true that soybean removes more of that potassium, 25 pounds more than it does corn. But the key factor is the corn doesn't remove as much. If you fertilize your corn crop, you got 180 pounds of potassium in that stover. I like to call it stover rather than trash, because that stover has 120 pounds of potassium in it. If somebody's going to pay you $30 to make biofuel out of it, well, you just gave up $70 worth of potassium. So don't do that, unless you want to call it trash. So there's enough potassium in the corn stover to supply 2/3 of the potassium that the soybean crop needs. Now the key thing is phosphorus. A 230 bushel corn crop requires 100 pounds P2O5 of phosphorus. That's 250 pounds of MAP. So it requires 100 pounds, 80% of it removed with the grain. I bought 250 pounds of MAP, I put it in my corn, it cost me a fortune. I said, well, at least I'm fertilizing next year's soybean crop. But guess what? When I grew 230 bushel corn, the corn crop took it all up, removed 80% of it. So I only left 20 pounds. 62 bushel soybean actually needed 50 pounds. I only supplied 20. So it had to take the other 30 pounds up out of the soil. And then it removes 40. That's a net loss of 20. It's phosphorus, not potassium, which is the biggest element, the fertilizer element that's limiting soybean yield. And I'll show you this. Well, I'll show you this by showing you the pattern of uptake of when is this potassium and phosphorus absorbed by the plant. So same 62 bushel soybean crop. Here I'm showing you how much potassium is in the crop as a function of time. Okay, so here's pounds potassium in the crop, pounds per acre. Here's time, and I put time as calendar days and growth stages. So you know these growth stages, I hope. This V stuff is leaf nodes, and this R stuff is the bean. I mean, I blame Iowa State for coming up with this, but that's the main system that's used to stage soybean. And over here I put a percentage of the total. So a 62 bushel soybean crop, you can see it has to take up potassium all the way up to, middle of seed fill. See that? Middle of seed fill. But most of that potassium is in the stem. In fact, there's enough potassium in the stem to supply all the potassium that the seed needs. Doesn't have to take up any for the seed, it just got it in the stem. Now if I show you the same thing for phosphate, 62 bushel soybean, notice how the soybean crop has to take up phosphate longer in the season than it does potassium. I mean, all the way up to R6. I mean, so compare that one. Then I'll go back. There's potassium. There's phosphorus. I thought I was going back. Got a meltdown here. Oh yeah, where's escape? Computers don't like me. I'm kind of edgy around them. Top left. My associate's all over this. So if you look at the uptake pattern, see how this doesn't take it up as long as does phosphorus? I hope we're going to phosphorus. There it is. See how it takes it up longer? And see how it doesn't have this big stem reservoir? So that phosphorus that the plant needs for the seed has to come into the root all the way through. Phosphorus is probably the element most limiting soybean productivity. It's not potassium, as a lot of people think. So what about number 3? This has to do with what seed you plant, genetics or variety. Man, I watch you guys, you agonize over what corn variety you'll use. And then, you know, soybean, you could care less. Is it round? You know, I mean, it's good enough for me. And this is a big mistake, boy. I'll tell you, all varieties aren't equal. I'll show you 10 varieties done at Champaign at my research site with our high-tech package. Jason's going to show you our high-tech package here in a minute. But presumably, by growing these things under high-tech, we've removed all other limitations. And so this is at Champaign last year, 10 varieties grown with high-tech. Notice they range from 54.5 to 66 bushels, almost a 12-bushel swing in yield. So variety makes a huge difference. Now, I won't name them for you, but I'll tell you that 5 of these are Roundup 1 and 5 of these are Roundup 2. So which ones do you think are Roundup 1 and which ones do you think are Roundup 2? Roundup 1, Roundup 2. 1, we'll play eye doctor here. 1, 2. Pretty sure I'm not going to bin run 1, I'll tell you, man, after I see this kind of data. What's number 4? So number 4 is foliar protection. And if you think about the soybean plant, it has 19 nodes. Each node can support the pods and seeds, and it's the leaf at the closest node that supplies the energy for the pod or the seed at that node. And you know, so I got to protect all 19 leaves. Doesn't take many bites out of a bean leaf beetle out of that leaf to hammer the nodes and seed at that node. So foliar protection is number 4, and it sort of has to do with what the yield components of soybean are. If I look at soybean yield components, yield is a product function of how many pods I have. You know, that's the big one, and that one is largely influenced by the fertility, the weather, and to some extent the genetics. Damn these things. Okay, got it. I didn't need my associate for that. So the number of pods controlled by the weather and the fertility, and to some extent the genetics, and the number of seeds per pod clearly influenced by the genetics. I can't tell you how much time I spent looking for that 5-bean pod, and if I'd have found that, I wouldn't have to be here. And then once I have all those pods and seeds, then the key is to fill them out. I mean, you know, looking at soybean plant, predicting its yields, pretty tough. You know, especially if they're filled with BBs, and that's where the foliar protection comes in. Crucial to protect each leaf to get that seed weight. And I'll show you why it's so important. You know, there's a linear relationship between the weight of each individual seed and the soybean yield. Now, we modeled this for fairly high soybean yield, because remember, we're after 85 bushels, and we did it at a set seed number. So this is 293 seed per foot. Okay, that would be 12.5 million per acre seed. That's how many seeds you got to have to grow 70 bushel soybean. And then after that, if each 2 milligram increase in soybean in the weight of each seed gives me a bushel. So if I increase each seed, you know, 10 milligrams, that's 5 bushels. And this is 100% about foliar protection. Number 5, this is seed treatment. You get a little carried away here, of course. This includes inoculum or whatever your magic growth regulator is as well. But I'm going to talk largely about protecting from diseases and stresses. So, you know, if I have a fungicide, insecticide, nematicide I can plant earlier. Probably need those if you plant earlier. And so that seed treatment then protects me from diseases so that my seed emerges. And I'll show you an example of this from last year. I mean, here's untreated seed. See how I got a little disease here? Here's the treated one, the full component, a lot less disease. And we saw this at our site last year. This isn't my site, and we didn't get around to taking a picture of this difference until R2. But last year I saw an enormous improvement from seed treatment. You know, when I just used fungicide alone, or I had the complete seed treatment, and this is at the R2 growth stage, look at the difference in the appearance of the plant. I mean, not only did I get the seed out of the ground, but it got out of the ground faster and was protected for longer. And you could see this all the way up to flowering. You could still see this in the field, again, at R2 growth stage. Here's the full seed treatment. Here's just the fungicide. And this is an expensive scientific instrument that measures the height of the plant. Buy those from the military, very expensive. But you can see it's different there. So seed treatment number 5, and number 6 is row arrangement. And you know why you're changing the row arrangement? It's to intercept light earlier, or to have more air movement in the canopy. And we're going to show you. We're looking at 2 row arrangements. We're going to show you 20-inch rows and 30-inch rows. And I know nobody grows soybean in 20-inch rows yet, but you will when you have a 20-inch corn planter. I mean, we think the future of corn is 20. We also think the future of soybean is 20. And partly we'll show you why here in a second. But if you look at 20-inch rows compared to 30-inch rows, I intercept light faster, but I have less air movement. You know, I mean, if I don't have a lot of air movement, I might get white mold. If I knew I was going to be dry, boy, I'd want a 30-inch row, because now I have more area here that I can draw the nutrients out of. So if you think about row arrangement, it's largely going to interact with where you are and what the weather is. So knowing all this, knowing these 6 secrets, we came up with a high-tech package. This is our high-tech package, and I'm going to let my associate talk about this. This is Jason Haegele. He's actually the brains behind our outfit. I got a big mouth, but he's pretty smart. So I'll let him tell you this work. Still working.
So Fred would be a pretty dangerous guy if he actually had a brain, so we kind of complement one another pretty well. So Fred has set the stage really well for what we did in 2012 in cooperation with the Illinois Soybean Association, looking at some of the various factors that we either know or believe should impact soybean yield. To start assigning a value to each of these factors, we had to compare a couple of different management practices for soybean production. In this slide, the orange text is what we're calling our standard system. And I realize there's really no one standard system, but what we wanted to design was a management practice representative of what has been done either in the past or is currently being done. And then the factors listed in blue are the so-called high-tech or intensive management practices, which represent the future of soybean production. In this standard system, for fertility, we're relying on the fertility that we applied the year before for corn production, either phosphorus or potassium. The variety that we used was a variety of more typical maturity for the location or the region in which we were conducting the trial. And then we applied very minimal crop protection to this variety of typical maturity. We did not apply either a fungicide or an insecticide. And then for the seed treatment, we used a couple of different options. In one set of trials, we used untreated or raw seed. And then in another trial, we used seed that had been treated with a fungicide only. On the high-tech side, we're specifically fertilizing the soybeans to achieve potentially higher yield. And to do this, we're supplying Micro-Essentials SC, which supplies nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and zinc. And the rate that we used here, 75 pounds P2O5, was designed to target the total uptake requirement of an 80 or 85 bushel soybean crop. To ensure the availability of this fertility, we banded it 4 to 6 inches directly beneath the row ahead of planting using a fertilizer toolbar set up for dry products like Micro-Essentials. For the variety, we're using a longer possible maturity variety for the region because we want to take advantage of the entire season, not just a portion of the season. And then we're protecting this variety of longer maturity with a season-long approach to crop protection with a foliar fungicide, insecticide, or both in combination. And then we're protecting it from the very beginning with a seed treatment that contains a fungicide, insecticide, and nematicide. And then we actually do all of these treatments in both 30-inch row spacing and 20-inch row spacing. We did not do this trial just one time. We actually did it multiple times across 4 different locations in Illinois, ranging from DeKalb in the north, through Rushville and Champaign in central Illinois, west and east, and then Harrisburg in the far southern part of the state. There were 2 trials at Champaign and Rushville, and then 1 trial each at DeKalb and Harrisburg. All of these trials had very similar treatment factors, particularly the banded fertility at planting, but they did vary on the varieties used, both the seed brand and the maturity, as well as the foliar protection products used, which were supplied by either Syngenta or the Monsanto BASF collaboration. We did these trials in both 30-inch and 20-inch rows at a constant seeding rate. We actually seeded at close to 180,000 seeds per acre with the goal of ending up with a final population of about 160,000 plants per acre. So population was not a treatment factor in our trials. Through our corn work at the University of Illinois, we've developed a unique design for evaluating management factors that we refer to as an omission plot. What I show here is the omission plot for soybean production, where we look at each of these individual factors by either omitting them from a high-tech system, where we've used all the factors in combination at their high-tech levels, or by adding them one at a time to the traditional level, where we have the factors at their traditional or the way they would have been done in the past. So on the traditional side, you can think of this really as sort of a standard agronomy trial, where we're looking at individual factors one at a time and comparing it to an untreated check, that being the traditional treatment. On the high-tech side, though, we're looking at the value or the loss of that factor when we omit it from a systems approach that employs all of these factors in combination. You'll notice that I don't have row spacing in this slide because at the University of Illinois in our research we have a lot of various tricks of the trade, but one thing that we haven't figured out how to do is how to change row spacing on the go. So actually all of the treatments were done in both 30-inch rows and 20-inch rows at each location. Fred's talked about the reasons for these different row spacings. But we selected 20-inch rows as opposed to 15-inch rows because we had the capability to place fertility in 20-inch rows as opposed to 15-inch rows to avoid the problem of running over the rows where we had already placed fertility in creating compaction from that extra pass. So these row spacing trials gave us a really robust estimate of how these various management factors interact with row spacing, and happily there was no interaction of the different factors like fertility, foliar crop protection, and seed treatment with row spacing. So what I show you here are the effect of row spacing averaged across the various treatments in all 6 trials that we conducted in 2012 throughout Illinois. The increase in yield from the narrow row spacing or 20-inch row spacing was greatest at the far northern location in DeKalb, and actually 20-inch rows yielded less than the 30-inch rows at Harrisburg. This makes some sense. As we go farther north in this state, we have a shorter season, a cooler season, so there's greater value potentially to having a narrow row spacing to intercept more light early in the season. However, at Harrisburg, which was our driest site in 2012, we believe that the extra space beneath or between the rows in the 30-inch row system allowed a sort of a fallow or extra supply of moisture at that very dry location that we encountered in 2012. Returning to our omission plot design, there are several different comparisons that we can make and that I'll show you as we go through the upcoming slides. The first one that we'll look at is this comparison between the traditional system and the high-tech system. So this looks at the impact of managing all of these factors simultaneously and the potential yield increase that we can gain from that systems approach to management. The other comparisons that we can then look at are the addition of each of these individual factors to the standard system, again sort of the standard agronomy testing approach, and then at the same time look at the value of that factor under a high-tech system where we've managed everything well and presumably limited or removed limitations to yield. These are the 6 trials from 2012 at the different locations. And the first thing that we're going to look at is the comparison between the standard and the high-tech system. So this is the increase in yield from managing all of those factors at the same time. We had a positive and significant increase in yield from the high-tech system across all 6 locations. And this increase ranged from 7.5 bushels per acre to 12 bushels per acre, or close to 12 bushels per acre in a couple of instances. And so this gives us an inclination of that management really is important to soybeans, and that there's things that we can do to increase yield even in a stressful year like 2012. So now the question becomes, in this increase in yield that we see between the standard and the high-tech, which factors contributed to that increase? If the average is nearly 10 bushels per acre across these 6 trials, did the 5 factors each contribute 2 bushels per acre, or were there some factors that were more important than others? So the first thing that we'll look at is the standard system and the effect of adding individual factors one at a time to our standard system. Averaged across those 6 trials in 2012, the average yield of the standard management system was about 50 bushels per acre. So not a bad yield at all. But if we take one factor at a time and add it to the standard system, we gained yield, had a significant increase in yield for each of the factors. Fertility, the extra nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and zinc supplied as microessentials, contributed nearly 5 bushels per acre just by itself. The second factor had the second largest increase came from the full foliar crop protection approach, where we applied both a fungicide and an insecticide. And this is pretty interesting, because in 2012 we had very little disease in all of our trials, but yet we still had a significant positive increase from the fungicide by itself. And then as far as insects, our primary pest was bean leaf beetle. So we have a very large impact from the insecticide by itself. And then when we apply them together, we get slightly more yield than each one by itself. Now we'll look at the high-tech system and the impact of removing each of these factors from a full systems approach to managing yield in soybean. Across 6 trials, the average yield of the high-tech system was 60 bushels per acre, so that 10 bushel per acre increase from managing soybean. And now we're removing individual factors from the high-tech system. So for example, if we remove the fertility and replace it with the fertility supplied by the previous corn crop, but we leave the maturity of the variety at a later maturity, we retain the fungicide and insecticide, the full seed treatment, we lose nearly 4 bushels per acre from not having that extra fertility in the system. As with the standard approach, each of these factors had a significant impact on yield when it was removed from the full high-tech system. The fertility being the factor with the largest effect, and then the foliar crop protection, fungicide and insecticide used together, having the second largest impact on overall yield. Here I show them together. Again, we have the 10 bushel per acre increase from the standard to the high-tech, and then the value of each individual factor from fertility through seed treatment under the standard and the high-tech system. If you add up each of these individual factors, the potential increase actually comes out to about 15 bushels per acre, but yet we only saw a 10 bushel per acre increase in our standard versus high-tech comparison. So we believe that potentially in a better year, there's greater yield to be gained from having all of these factors used in combination as a systems approach. And sort of to distill things down, what we've done is average the value of each of those individual factors across the standard system, the high-tech system, and all of those locations in 2012 in the state of Illinois. Fertility, the extra nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and zinc had the largest average effect on yield, 4 bushels per acre, 4.3 bushel per acre increase, and then, as we saw in the individual slides, the foliar protection, or the combination of fungicide and insecticide, had the second largest overall effect at just under 4 bushels per acre. The average effect of row arrangement, or the narrowing of rows from 30 inches to 20 inches, was about 2 bushels per acre, but this varied across locations, being greater in the north and less in the south. So based on our preliminary data in 2012, we're very confident that soybean yield in Illinois and in other states can be increased with crop management. And this represents sort of a new way of thinking about soybeans. Each of the factors or secrets that we tested in 2012 has an independent effect on yield. And there are a lot of things that you can do to increase yield, but really the greatest gain or greatest benefit comes when you use multiple factors together in combination. We'd like to take a few minutes just to acknowledge some of our other personnel in the crop physiology laboratory at the University of Illinois that couldn't be with us today. We also work with a number of various organizations and companies on this project because, again, this is a systems approach that implements not only crop protection, fertility, and seed, but also equipment and other inputs. And especially we'd like to thank the Illinois Soybean Association for their support and prompting to get this project started in 2012. And we'd also like to thank GrowMark for their support of not only the yield trials, but also our participation here in the summit today. We do have a website for our laboratory. I encourage you to visit this link when you have time. We have not only our corn research, but also our soybean research, and a full report of our trials that were conducted in 2012. And then finally, I'd like to thank you for your attention this morning. I realize you have several choices of breakout sessions, so thanks for choosing breakout session number 2.